world champs, and then obviously we had Motocross the Nation, and I was watching that. Would you ever want to see? I don't know how they would do it, but more of like a team thing versus an individual thing, where it's like a team points versus individual one race. Like I said, I don't know how you would set it up or keep it as is. All right, Josh. Thanks for coming on, man. We talk a lot, but we haven't done one of these literally since Snowshoe, which seems like eternity. So we'll get into the downhill. We'll kind of recap, what we think and what's your thoughts if any riders may go to different teams. But first, I want to get out there of what's going on this weekend. I'll be there. I'll be involved. I just kind of want you to promote what you've been working hard on.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good.
So you have you're doing a enduro. I mean, how many hands do you have helping you with the enduro?
Oh man. So my wife helps a lot, especially on race day with registration and all that kind of stuff. And she's helping at home with awards and getting some stuff ready, and all the tedious tasks that go with making the race weekend happen. On the ground at Sugar Camp, we've got endless trail volunteers. Josh Turner is one of the big ones. He's kind of the guy in town that really got the trail started, and he's had a handful of people helping him. But on the shuttle day and race day, we'll have even the mayor out helping with stuff, probably
Wow.
his wife, and then a handful of others that just show up and volunteer. It's a pretty big joint effort between the city, the tourism, the park, the trail guys, to make these events happen. And then I even have a few people from Lexington coming down to help volunteer a couple days before with just setting up course signage and tape and all that stuff. And then the guy from the West Virginia Enduro Series named Ben, he's coming down to help time it. So,
Dang, man.
lots of hands involved to, make it happen. We're excited about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped. I was texting you today. I'm nervous and excited. And you're like, why be nervous? But racing some XC, just doing like weekly races, you just kind of get the nerves at the starting gate, and even though it's like a friendly race, then it was kind of like, all right, yeah, just calm down, just calm down. But yeah, I'm pretty pumped. I've never been there. From where I'll be driving in Florence, Kentucky to Prestonburg, I think I'm around 2.5, 3 hours. Never even think I've been to that side of the state, honestly. So I'm excited to check it out.
Yeah, dude, it's so beautiful over there. It'll be one of your favorite spots to ride, at least in like Kentucky and Southern Ohio area. You know, I guarantee it.
Uh, was there a reason why you chose Sugar Camp, or you just have relations with those people to go with?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a great relationship with all the local people in Sugar Camp and all that is Prestonsburg as far as like how they operate and what they got going on. But honestly, like the trails are really great for this type of event. They're really good for being able to have shuttles, have long descents. The trails are clean, they're fun, they're technical, they're what you want for an enduro, and they're the best I think Kentucky has to offer for an enduro. So it just
Nice.
made sense to bring this format of race there.
All right, cool, dude. I'm pretty excited. So I'll see you there on Saturday. All right, so let's get into it. Yeah, like I said, we left off at Snowshoe, so we can kind of just skip over not skip over the last two races. We just don't have to like go to each race. Let's just kind of go over it a little bit. So, leaving Snowshoe, it was wet, rainy, and Purion seemed like he kind of had it in the bag. It was kind of like he had to basically finish 25th at Mount St. Anne, and that didn't happen. He got 28th, which brought Finn back into the mix, and that was like everyone was pumped for the last race, because the points were so tight. What um I mean, what do you think? I know before we get into like what ended up happening, who would you have
Mhm.
taken head to head on that?
Oh man, a home crowd is hard to beat, and Finn put down the run he needed to in front of his fellow Canadians. And I'll be honest, it was kind of surprising to see Pirion, drop the ball. I mean, he had it in
Yeah.
the back. He took like probably for his pace, like a 70% run and still top 25. Um, but man, it was interesting to see. I mean, a lot of guys also crashed. Like I think Benoit crashed up top. I know of a
Yeah.
handful crashes in practice. And people come kind of unwound during finals round because it takes a lot to win a classic track like that. Um, so I think it was nice for us as like spectators and fans of the sport to like him not win it early and him
Yeah.
have to perform at the last race and keeping the somewhat young gun in their fin, I think made for more exciting of a series and not just like Pirion's running away with it. This is getting kind of boring. Of course, he's going to win feeling that we were almost
Yeah.
getting ready to accept and face. So it definitely made for more entertaining racing. But I'll be honest, like I'm surprised he dropped it. But Finn came out swinging and did what he had to do. Um, so I think that made for an interesting, going into the final chapter of the 2022 season. I guarantee, given that same run again, I don't know that Pirion would make that mistake. I'd say he would tone it down and not overdo it. It's one of those mistakes you sometimes only make once in a career. We've seen like Pom Pom, I think, did it last year at Snowshoe, had it in the bag, and then blew up in her finals run where it was double points,
Yeah.
and that that cost her. I think Valley ended up getting it in 2021. So some of that stuff, like you may make that mistake once in your career, but hopefully no more than that, or you make sure to never make that mistake and don't put yourself in that position. So yeah.
Yeah. Mount St. Anne went nuts because obviously Finn's Canadian. I mean, the atmosphere there was unreal. And super pumped for him. And we've talked. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the guy. I just would love to see him, continue to win or be on top. I mean, he had a great season all around. As we go into the final, did he hit his head at World Champs or practice of World Champs? Wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
Uh,
it was with Jay. So yeah, I'm pretty
yeah,
sure he didn't get race world champs because we were, everybody was hoping that he'd carry that energy into that, and I don't even think he started. So
right.
pretty unfortunate. That course is eating some people up. It's pretty steep and gnarly course.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. And then so it kind of put a little like the World Cup's over because Pirion just kind of won outright, and you could tell even when interviewing him, hey, have you noted? Have you like felt it yet? And he was kind of like, no, I haven't. You could tell before he went down, he was. It hasn't really. I don't think it hit him because there was no. He already won, but it wasn't like I had to go for it.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It
uh,
was post race interview there with Rob Warner and them. It was a little like I don't like we just knew he was going to have it. I mean,
yeah,
so that big like I won this feeling almost like when Loic wins Worlds. It's just like that's kind of what you expect and it's normalized, which is wild to think about. Like, oh, you win a world championship or oh, you win a World Cup overall, but like it being
yeah,
normalized. Unlike the thing like Finn winning at Mount St. Anne being like something super unique.
yeah,
Winning an overall series is huge. Winning the World Cup overall is huge. But it definitely felt like kind of almost mundane just because I think we had expected that from probably June, July, till September there.
yeah. Uh, what do you think most riders rather have, rainbow stripes or a World Cup overall?
I think the overall, the rainbow stripes looks cool, and you can always like have that on your like have a little collar on your sleeve or whatever. You
Yeah,
always get to carry that with you as a world champ. And of course, the white jersey with the rainbow stripes is just the sickest thing to have come race day. But to win a World Cup overall takes a lot more than just one race of good luck or just training for just one weekend of the year. A World Cup
yeah,
overall takes 6 months of being on top of your game during a race season and seasons of prep going into it. And one of the coolest things, and I think this is what a lot of people forget, is that you don't have to win a single race to win a World Cup overall. We saw Matt Walker in
right.
2020 win the World Cup overall, and his first World Cup win was in 2021 at Leogang. Pretty sure it's Leogang. And like that's huge. It's like Mr. Consistent can win a World Cup overall, which is sponsors of course want that, teams want that, the racer obviously wants that, and I think that really says something about like I'm a dedicated, I'm a good racer. I've obviously put the time in, put the training in, and the list goes on to be able to win that World Cup overall versus just like I'm this crazy dude that's loose on a bike and I'm going to go checkers and records and win 2 or 3
Yeah.
races, crash 2 or 3 races, and luckily just win the overall. Like the guy that's always getting second is probably a lot more dialed and a little less lucky than the guy that like just wins everything in some ways.
Yeah.
And at the other, like at the reverse of that, we got like Loic, who's like, he can just win at world champs. Like whatever the dude can like figures out, he can go to world champs, look at the rainbow stripes and say, I want that, and go get it. And, it's like, why doesn't he do that at all the other races? Well, maybe to him, maybe world champs is more important, or maybe he's just better at putting that one race together and knowing he can put that one race or that one weekend together in the year versus other guys that are like, I know how to be consistent and that's what I want to focus on. And I think that's a little bit of it too. I mean, look at Menard. He can be consistent. He can pretty much tell you what position he's going to get before he drops in on the day.
Yeah.
And I mean, that comes with like 20 some years of racing experience at the World Cup level, of course. But, that really, I think that really speaks to kind of how everything is approached. But at the end of the day, I think it's a lot harder to win a World Cup overall than it is just to go out and win one big race.
Yeah, and this season it was like seemed like I can't remember what is it, like 8 races or something. Like this was a long season, it wasn't like we had just 5. I think we had 8 races this season. So
Yeah, we
that's
hadn't. Yeah, hadn't had that since COVID. That kind
yeah.
of changed the face of things.
And then definitely, even though he was not in it for as an overall, but stepped it on the last since snowshoe, and then kind of carried that momentum was Bernard Kerr. And by the way, is it Bernard? Because some people are saying now that he doesn't say that, or I don't know. I
Bernard.
still call him Bernard. Bernard, yeah. But
Yeah.
he
It's
carried,
probably just the pronunciation of the Brit versus the English
yeah.
or the American or whatever. Yeah.
But he carried that momentum from snowshoe to Mount St. Anne, and that was awesome to see him just seeing him on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
he's so good.
I think he probably had the biggest cheering section at the last few races because it was a lot of people, like, whether that's your favorite rider or not, everybody feels like he's due for a win. So
Yeah.
they definitely were, revving the chainsaws and hooting and hollering and stuff at the last few World Cups. And I think his win's coming. It's like many others. It's like Benoit, is like Matt earlier this year. His day's coming. I mean, he's been second, a close second now, and yeah, it's just a matter of time. I doubt he'll retire before he gets his World Cup win. And honestly, the results that he was putting in towards the end of this season, if he carries that into next season, we could see him having a serious fight at the overall. I mean, bearing that Pirion don't win everything or Loic don't win everything, those kinds of like consistent podium finishes makes a really big difference. And I think he's capable of that. I think Kerr's definitely capable of being that consistent guy that sneaks a win in at some point, but can keep it together enough to, be in serious contention for overall. Kind of like how Finn was this year until his injury.
Yeah. Go back to, like you said, Mr. Consistency. That's how it, like, if you watch Moto, Ryan Dungey was always at. He always had the podiums and boring to watch. Honestly, he was kind of boring to watch, but he always was on the podium. So, and that won him championships.
Yeah, absolutely. He was all business, like, perfect lines, nothing flashy, just 10% faster and smooth and consistent. You didn't see any surprise whatsoever. That was and that's how that's how some guys go. Yeah.
Yeah. The Americans came on at the end there. I was happy to see that. I think they're going to have some momentum going into next year. I feel like those two guys still continuing to work together. I'm assuming is Dakota a 2-year or was he a 1-year deal?
As far as I know, he's 2 year. Unless something
Okay.
changed, I'm pretty sure that's a 2 or 3 year. I want to lean towards two thinking, but
Okay.
don't quote me on that. Another thing to know is like bike industry, like the contracts can change. Like assuming that the team or the sponsors or whatever it would be, don't have anything like drastic happen, or the rider don't have an injury that like gets them out of a contract or something like that. Like contracts are like, you respect them and stuff, but there's a lot of, situations where a team may fold or a rider may change, even though they were contracted for another year or two or vice versa. Um, those, contracts can be negotiated and people can be bought out and so on and so forth. So, you know, just because you're under contract doesn't always mean that like you're not going to change teams, or that
Right.
that team's not going to say, yeah, we're going in a different direction. It's pretty normal as far as like, it's like hiring a contractor. It's like you
Yeah.
plan for that contractor to be who builds your house, but for whatever reason, if they can't perform, or they don't like the job or something like that, that can always change. So kind of the same thing.
Yeah. My parents are going through that right now, remodeling. Some guys like showed up and he's like, "Hey, you still owe me?" Like, "You still owe us work." But
Yeah, yeah, right.
it's like I was like, "Man, I do not want to be in their shoes." But yeah, so I was gonna ask this. So a little bit of world champs, and then obviously we had Motocross the Nation, and I was watching that. Would you ever want to see, I don't know how they would do it, but more of like a team thing versus an individual thing, where it's like a team points versus individual one race? Like I said, I don't know how you would set it up or keep it as is.
Yeah, so there's team podiums at all the World Cups, but it's like kind of not really talked about. Like they like basically whichever team has the best results of the day, there's a points matrix for it, all that stuff. And typically it's someone like Commensal Muckoff, because Amare and Pom Pom would do well, or Commensal Duval because Camille and Benoit would do well, and there's a couple other fast riders on there. So there's a team competition. I want to think intense because of Dakota and Aaron's podium at Val d'Isole. I want to think that they won, or at least on the podium of like the best team of the day. Um, and that's something that it maybe a photo is on the highlight, and that's about it. But you don't see it on the broadcast because it's like
Yeah,
after podiums and so on and so forth. Um, I really think that like if there was more to it, like if there was more for the teams, and maybe this comes with Discovery's takeover and stuff next year, if there was more of a team aspect, I definitely think that it could change a little bit of how some people race. Like it might change like your guy that races for 15th spot, how they race versus the guy that races for first. Because if you're going for first, you're going for first.
yeah,
That's whatever happens, whatever happens. It's still an individual sport. There's probably rarely a case that you're going to say, I'm not going to risk it. I really think I can win. If I crash, I crash, but I think I can win today if I just push it. There's probably rarely a chance for World Cup racing that you would say, well, I'm going to tone it down a bit just for my team to get points, and I'm going to miss out on a World Cup win.
yeah,
Like, that's a pretty hard ask. Like, you can ask that in collegiate sports sometimes, like more teamwork with cross country racing and stuff like that. But when it comes to a World Cup, it's, you treat every World Cup like it's your last.
yeah,
Um, however, I do think that, like, team atmosphere or team, like, I guess you could say, like, structure and stuff like that could be more like standardized, because like some teams you'll have like a few girls and a few guys, some will be all guys, some will be a lot of juniors and one pro. It's all over the place. And if there was a point scoring system, I could see that teams would try to like align, like I want two fast females, I want two fast males, and I want two fast juniors, which could actually be pretty cool. And you could kind of start to see maybe more more like strategy with the team, and a little bit
yeah,
like broader like placement, like with how they would place in the results just because of budget. And then at EWS you had the what's it called? Nations, the race of nations, or trophy of nations, or
yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
where it's like 3 person from each country. And I want to think it was Richie, Nick Nestroff, and I forget who the third guy was for the US, but they did super well. Like you race together, and it's like I guess, combined time of like those three that are on the course together, and it almost seems like an adventure race. Like you have to like stick together as a team, and it's like if you let someone like behind, and like that's your finish time is when they finish, or almost like a time trial, like on the road, which is pretty cool actually. Um, I don't really know, that wouldn't really equivalent to downhill any, and I think that EWS just doing that for one race makes sense. But I think we could have a little bit more fandom in the races like sports teams have if we had like a whole team we could get behind sometimes, more
Yeah,
than just one rider. It's like if we were pulling for 3 or 4 riders that were all on the same team, we're like, man, I love this team, I love what they do, I like their team manager, I like how they race, blah blah blah. I actually think it would change kind of how we like view the sport and treat the sport. Instead of just cheering for someone to be checkers or wreckers and throw down a great run, you could
yeah,
have like a really exciting experience if you had 3 people that were all on the same team and you're pulling for, and it was one of those things.
yeah. The only scary part is the French. They would
Dude,
it would be insane.
I know, like maybe we'd have to limit limit some things there, but I mean, well, and it wouldn't have to be by nation. I think by
Yeah,
like by like
team.
brand, or like by name
Yeah,
or team name, trade name, or whatever you want to call it. I think would be sick because it's like you could have like the best quarterback in the world, and you just can't root for that NFL team because maybe the coach and the rest of the players just aren't your vibe. But
yeah,
you'd really like to, but that quarterback's just only one small piece of the puzzle. You just can't be for the rest of the team. And what if you had more reason to be for like a whole team? Like, how does that change like consumerism and how we do and view the sport and how they race and all kinds of things? It's a great question, and it's actually something I've thought about a lot because our sport is definitely extremely unique in how we are fans of it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
even in Formula One or motocross, you're still like, yeah, I would love to be for so and so, but I'm a Honda guy through and through, so sorry. And that's not
yeah,
as much like, and that's way more like in moto than it is in mountain biking, because there's like a lot of brands that most people can get behind because there's so many. It's not just like 5 brands like it is in moto, and in mountain biking you can get behind a few brands. You can get behind the technology and like the different suspension design, or like where they are from, like all across the world. And you know, there's a lot more to consider, and I guess a lot more like uh, things to think about as you would view being a fan of mountain biking if it was more than just you being a fan of one person.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, it's a good thought. Like, yeah, how can we do it? And maybe someone's thought about it, and maybe yeah, maybe Discovery is working on that. That'd be awesome. More
And
more to the sport for sure. I'm all about it.
yeah, and I think with them combining enduro and downhill, it's possibly a thing that could happen. Is that you're going to see more like team collaboration between that downhill and enduro team,
Hmm.
because you have guys like Eddie Masters or something that does both, and
Yeah,
does both fairly well. So I definitely think that like it could create you to be like a super fan in some ways because they're combining those forces lightly, and I think that just creates opportunity because at the end of the day, we're all like most people wouldn't be as glued to mountain biking if it wasn't for what Red Bull TV has done.
yeah, yeah,
Like it's just the reality of we'll watch a video and we'll like listen to a podcast and such, and we'll see stuff on Instagram, but like we're probably not going to sit down and flip open a magazine and read a race report. Like that's just not where our
yeah,
culture's at. So had it not been for like what Red Bull TV's done with stuff and like how social media has been impacted and everything like that, we wouldn't be the fans of the sport that we are. And I think that's just natural, but it's also a good thing that our sport's grown because of those things.
yeah. I hope that we don't lose viewers because they're going to Discovery, which is going to be a paying streaming. I don't know what the cost is, but I just hope people are like, well, I'm not going to pay just for that. But you could just pay and then cancel once the season's over. I mean, I do that with motocross. I just
Right.
Peacock once it's over. Well, I mean, I did keep it this year to watch some shows, but in a sense, it was $5 a month. And then when the season's over, we just cancel and come back. So it's not terrible.
Right.
But a little bit back to it. The women's Camille broke her collarbone at it was snowshoe, right? Was it? I can't remember. Pretty sure it was snowshoe, or was
It
it
was
Mount Saint? No, it was
yeah.
Mount Saint
It's
Anne.
one of
Mount Saint
the
Anne.
two. Yeah. I mean, she raced like 2 weeks after she broke it with a plate in it, and
Yeah,
did great. So like, hats off to her. That's just wild.
yeah, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Most people would not race 2 weeks after breaking their collarbone,
So,
but great season for her. You know, great season for Nina. Um, I mean, I don't know. I'm liking the women's more and more watching them because I think it's just those. It's just so back and forth between like 5 or 6 women that it's like you just don't know. It's not so dominant like Rachel. No offense. I mean Rachel was great, but
yeah.
the inconsistency, I guess you would call it a little bit, is it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean Rachel and like even Tracy Mosley and you know, there's been a lot of women that have just dominated for years on end and not quite as much on the guy side. There's also a lot bigger field on the guy side, but the fact that like over 1/3 of the girls that race elite women's finals have a chance at winning, I think makes it more exciting because they only take
Yeah.
15. So
Right.
I think that, adds more to the stake of like who you're going to say is going to win because the percentage versus like, you're picking 1 out of 60 for the guys versus 1 out of 15 for the girls. But yeah, they're competitive. And sometimes when one of them has a good run, it could be like 15 or 20 seconds faster, and just like that's insane. But they're all pushing so hard that
Yeah.
sometimes that happens. A little bit less likely to see that happen on the guys' end, but it's pretty awesome to see how the women's end's doing and the competitiveness that it has right now.
Yeah. And they all seem like, I mean, obviously it's probably for podium voters, but they don't seem to like hate each other by any means. Now, I don't know, like whatever, but I feel like they're all seem like, all right, great run, great run. Let's all keep carrying this together, in a sense.
Yeah, they're probably a little more cordial in public than the guys feel.
Yeah.
A little less proper, a little less like bitter towards each other. But behind the scenes, they're definitely, if not more, like as competitive, if not more competitive than the guys are. Like
Yeah.
that's just the nature of sport and elite athletes. It's part of it.
Yeah. Wasn't it I think Rachel and Tanya Seagraves live near each other, and I think Rob was asking him, she's like, "Oh, do you see her? No, that's my competition," or something like that. Like, I know she's right down the road, but no, we're competing against one another. So,
Yeah.
um, and she hope to see her back pretty strong coming next year. So,
Mhm.
it's always good to see her up there. So let's get into if you heard anything. Do you know any team changes? Any riders changing? That's a
Um,
possibility.
I know of a couple, but I think it's too soon to say anything. Um, I don't think there's a lot. I don't think there's going to be any like huge
Yeah.
changes. I want to see that. I want to think that I saw some stuff about some teams folding and things like that. I know there's a few teams that may be getting into like, or a few brands that may be getting more into the sport or more into this side of the sport more than what they've been. Um, I would be surprised if we saw any of the big guys like Amare or Loic or Greg or anyone like that change teams. Like it just doesn't seem like they're probably not at that point in their career. It looks like Loic's super happy as Specialized from what I can tell. Amare obviously
Mhm.
doing great on the common saw that they've been developing, and I'd say Greg will be a Santa Cruz until he retires unless something changes. Um, and on the women's, I would say we could maybe see some change up on the women's side. I doubt Nina's going anywhere. She just went to Santa Cruz and she's had a great year with that. So I think it'd be best for her to stay there. But like Camille had a great year, and Dorval Commonsal is one of the smaller teams, and one of like probably like ranked like 2 or 3 on the Commonsal like ladder, I guess you could say. Don't necessarily mean that she has a bad deal whatsoever. However, I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't go shopping and look for some offers. When you win a overall and you do it with a plate in your shoulder, you're collarbone that kind of gives you a bargaining chip. And if you have that, this career is only 10 years long for most people, unless you're Greg Menard.
Yeah.
So you go shopping whenever you have the chance. Um, and same thing for, a handful of other riders. There's a lot of mid-pack riders that, they may be only getting a $20,000 like pay difference by going shopping a little bit if they've had that like top 15 result consistently or something. But, $20,000 to a guy that maybe only makes 40 or 50, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, lots of changes like that we'll probably hear of, especially with, I have heard that Common Style is going to downsize some teams. I don't know which teams they're going to cut, but they said that they were going to be downsizing. I think I don't know if I saw this in a rumor, or if it was an official post, but it definitely makes sense because they have like 8 World Cup teams. Like they're trying to
Yeah.
dominate. For my business experience and like what I've learned from the textbooks is like domination's cool and monopolies are cool and all that stuff. However, it's just like having like all your assets spread a little too thin. Like they might not be paying like some of their high level guys quite enough. Well, if your high level guys aren't getting paid enough and they're doing really, really well, like you can't just have a team that's down here getting like 50th, 60th, and 80th place from their riders while you neglect the guy that's on the top step every weekend because you can't, pay him what he needs. And that's, probably or maybe a thing that they face because like people like Camille and people like Amri have won overalls and, they've had tons of podiums with their bikes and so on and so forth. So I'd say a little bit of that like downsizing that they are allegedly doing is probably to help support the people on the top, which
Yeah.
makes total sense to me. I mean, hey, like keep watering the plant that's growing and, the ones that maybe aren't growing as much, like maybe just kind of let them go and figure out something else.
Do you think if Finn didn't have a good season, that would be maybe a topic, or do you think he feels like, because kind of in moto a little bit, there's always the top rider. Do you think he feels? You think it's one A or one rider one or A then B?
I think that like being a teammate with like someone that's like Loic, who is like the currently the world champion and like one of the best. There's always going to be that guy, and it's Specialized. It's one of the big brands, so there's always going to be that guy on Specialized. If Specialized has Loic and he's the guy that's winning worlds, winning a handful of World Cups, and like always a contender, they're not going to have a second place guy that like sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just not who Specialized is in the, they have the budget, they have the team, they have the status, they have the bikes, they have what they need to like have a legit number 2 guy. But the fact that Finn was in the running, the fact that Finn won a World Cup, I don't think makes him any less valuable or makes him any less in the limelight. Like it might have actually pulled some from Loic because Loic was kind of hurt
Yeah.
during all of that. And Finn was, he's getting to spray the champagne on the podium. So I definitely think that that's pretty dynamic duo. Like think about if they go
Yeah.
into 2023 and it's like they're that dominant, that's huge. Because we've only seen that recently with like Common Saw Muckoff with Pom Pom and Amare. And then they have a handful of like mid to podium guys like Japella. So, Finn might be looking, but the fact that Finn was on a prototype last year at the end of the year, did well on
Yeah.
it. The fact that he had good results, I don't think that would make Specialized say, hey, we need to move on. I would say if as long as the numbers are right, I would say that relationship would keep going on. I don't think that there would be any reason for it not to. Seems like everything's working out over there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good now. I think if he had a crummy season, there might be, who knows, maybe.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. If you have a crummy season and your teammate has a really really good season, you might not get as much attention monetarily as what you kind of need to like keep going forward and making a career for yourself. And at the same time, like you don't necessarily want to have one of those fallout seasons to where you have 2 bad seasons in a row,
Yeah.
and then you the next team that you go to, the pay's even lower. Like if you think that like your ship might be sinking, you want to find a life raft before it's full, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. When does YT plan on coming back? Downhill team.
Um, Can't say. There is some announcements coming, but I can't say.
Okay,
There's
okay.
some cool stuff in the works. YT, we're always doing stuff different. It's the marketing at YT is ran differently than a lot of other brands in the sense that they're not afraid to push the envelope or just surprise people or do things um, in unique ways to kind of fit like the model of the brand, young talent, and fit like various spots in the market that the brand thinks might be overlooked. So yeah, I think that a lot of people are going to be stoked and surprised about the upcoming announcement in the next month or so. I'm excited for it, and I think that it's good timing. So yeah, we'll talk about it when it happens for sure.
Will Dylan be racing? Would he have any? How do I put this so you can answer a little bit? Would he have any interest in racing a downhill like race? Dylan
Talking about
Stark.
start?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Oh man, yeah, no, not unless there's like some like booze and like illicit things down at the bottom or something like that
Yeah.
might motivate him. But no, he's creative. Like he's
Yeah.
extremely creative. I like to reference him as like a almost like a designer of slope style in the sense that he can look at something and figure out how to take his style and put it over that better than a lot of others. Like, yeah, you might see that with like, oh man, like your guy that does all the trialsy weird stuff from his house for Red Bull, like Swedish Rider or something like that. And like
Uh,
those guys
like
are
Kenny,
creative.
like Kenny
Or
Belay
like
type.
Delay or
Yeah.
even like Danny Mac. Like all those guys are creative in a certain sense. But like Dylan can like find things on a ride that most people will never see. And he can make like short edits and reels and stuff like that most people can never see, and it really adds a lot to his riding. Like at Proving Grounds, he did like a 360, like pretty flat out in front of the judge's booth and flipped them off. Like, yeah, he is more skilled to do like probably something different than like essentially a one-hander 360. Like he could have probably did like a 360 whip or something on it, like or a 360 bar spin at least because they're on big bikes. But that was like something unique, and it was like worth the risk of like the funny creativity of like doing something like kind of off the hook to be worth getting a good score. I mean, he got second at that event, and it was a pretty legit event. So. Um, I don't think he is meant to race, but I definitely think that he might do some pretty sick stuff this week at Rampage. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see
His
what he
bike,
can put together
his
for a
bike
run.
looks sick.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
His bike looks amazing. And what's crazy is once someone told me about like BMX and like people from like BMX background of how the culture is of BMX and then how it describes how Dylan is, it makes sense of like some people think
Yeah.
he's just reckless and out of control and whatnot. But like once you understand like BMX background and the culture and someone really explained it to me, it just makes sense of who he is.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, he's one of the most BMXer guys on a big bike still in that way.
yeah.
Like he definitely has the BMXer vibes, and I mean, that's where he came from. That's where a lot of those guys come from, is small bikes up to the big bikes, and I mean, it's how the sport's evolved. I mean, that's how it's got to where it's at. It's taking some stuff from Dave Mira, freestyle BMX on the PlayStation to 26-inch wheels and now 29-inch wheels and such. And yeah, definitely big part of the sport still.
All right. Let's talk about next season's schedule. And I mentioned this to you through text. Leo Gang and Lenzenheider back to back weekends.
Yep.
I mentioned I might try to go. It,
Yep.
is it legit? Like, I mean, those are two great places from what you're telling me. So I should try
Yep.
to do my best to make that trip.
Yeah. I mean, that would be two to definitely put back to back. Pretty close. That wouldn't be too long of a drive, but man, both venues are just absolutely gorgeous. You're kind of right in the middle of Europe in those two. Um, you're like northwestern Austria and then like northeastern Switzerland. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see how everything goes with the schedule. It's going to be busy once things get going. First downhill race is not until June, which is kind of late considering we had a race in March this year and another race in May. So the third race of the year, I guess, was Leo Gang this year, and that was in June. So first race of the year this coming season is not until June.
Goes to
So that'll
October.
be interesting for sure. Say again.
It goes to October, I think.
Yeah, it goes to October, right? It's a month later in the year, roughly, than what is normal. So, like, who knows? They might get snow at the last race. Maybe
That'd
that's
be
why they're doing.
wild. Yeah.
It's crazy. So I think it'll make for some good racing. It hopefully that'll make like the local regional races, like what to us, like the downhill southeast, maybe more events like that will get like more developed and have like more legit preseason, and it not go from like pretty small, like wet and just, I'm not gonna say boring, but not just smaller preseason races. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a build up into that World Cup season, almost like how it used to be when Norba had a big series. Is like, oh, you come do some Norba rounds and then you go do some World Cup rounds, and like one kind of fed the other and they didn't overlap or conflict with each other too much. Maybe that will, now be a thing that racers and all the countries and stuff can do. So we'll see.
Does U.S. Nationals, do they play off the World Cup schedule? How does that work?
The only thing that's bad about the U.S. Nationals is there's only a few venues that would be able to host a race before June that are current U.S. Nationals, and that would be like Windrock in Tennessee. They can host a race any time of the year pretty much. But, like Mammoth or Tahoe or maybe even Idaho, Killington, Angel Fire, Winter Park, all those venues, like May or earlier, is really pushing the limits of like trail conditions and snow on the trails, and is the bike park at operation yet, and a lot of those kinds of factors. The reality is most of our mountains are just twice the height that most of the European mountains are. So we have snow a little bit later into the year than they do. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like it's like rare to get below 4,000 or 5,000 feet for a mountain for downhill racing in the U.S. And that's like Lenzerheide is about as high as it gets for downhill racing in Europe, and that's at 6. Um, from where the race starts. So that's kind of a thing that hurts us in a roundabout way. Is our elevation is more, so the winter is longer higher up the mountain.
Yeah, and the season ends in Mount St. Anne, so it's snowshoe. Then I think next weekend is Mount St. Anne, like the last two of the season. Man, Mount St. Anne looks like a pretty good atmosphere to go to. Have you been there?
I'm not. It definitely looks. I watched the race recap. I was in Whistler, and we watched the race later that night after a demo day, and man, it it looked really good if you're a Canadian, especially with Finn's win this year. It looks like a great atmosphere to be in. So it was pretty cool. I mean, it's one of those classic venues. I think all the classic venues are always going to have big turnouts because people book vacation around it. They'll travel a few extra hours to get to those locations, and it's worth seeing. Like things like Petey's Plunge, and all the various like novelty named features of the course. It's a thing that people plan around. So I think Mount St. Anne is definitely always one of those to go to. Val de Sol is always one to go to. Snowshoe hopefully will eventually become one of those that's always worth going to. Fort Bill, apparently it's usually like one of the biggest crowds. And this year it's World Champs, so I'm sure it'll be huge with the way they're doing World Champs this year. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I'm already looking forward to it. Wish we had some like fall winter racing to watch a little bit,
Yeah. Season when it ends, it ends. After U.S. Open, at least for the American guys, it's done.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
I know. Well, hey man, I actually got a gig going here. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing this weekend. I know you're gonna be busy up to the day of, so
Oh yeah.
I'll see you this weekend, and I'm sure we'll chat prior to then. What do you guys do you have is there food or anything? Do I need to bring my own food?
Bring some food. I mean, we'll have we'll hopefully have a food truck there. Part of the time, there's a couple other events that like food trucks are trying to be at, just events with
Yeah.
more traffic, like their prioritizers and that stuff. So hopefully we'll have some food trucks, in and out throughout the weekend. But yeah, definitely, of course, bring your own food. I mean, there's also, it's only like 10-15 minute drive from town. Um, if you want to go back into town and, not cook. So.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's camping season. You got to cook, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, campground's gonna be full. It's gonna be a good time. Like 20 some racers all pushed together in the same camping like grid. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Perfect weather, 70s, no rain. Couldn't ask for better conditions.
One last thing. Do you, if it goes well, which I hope so, will you attach yourself to a series or just keep having that race?
We've talked to the guys at West Virginia Enduro Series, and like no pressure on them, but we'd probably like look to be part of the West Virginia Enduro Series. Like just make this races part of one of their stops, just to try to get some more people on these trails. It's big part of the mission is just to get people on the trails so they can travel there on their off weekends and ride and have fun and experience these good trail systems. So if that means putting it as part of the West Virginia Enduro Series, then we're definitely open for that, because I don't think we're going to have a Kentucky Enduro Series yet.
Right.
We just don't have the venues to make it like true enduros. Like some things would be kind of boring, kind of flat, a little Super
Yeah.
D, a little XC ish. So there's a couple venues that we're going to try to work some kinks out at and make something happen. But still, for a series, I think that Sugar Camp being part of the West Virginia series would make the most sense. So we'll see what happens and see how this weekend goes, and plan over the winter and go from there.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the time, and yeah, I'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Justin. See ya.